Welcome to Brigade, the podcast. I'm your host, Pelontle Mosimege. On this podcast, we bring you amazing trailblazing women to come and share their life and career journeys with you. From entrepreneurs to 9-to-5ers, join us as each guest takes you through all of the highs and all of the lows of their journeys that have led them to being who they are today. Hey, Zulaikha, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Pelo.
I'm so excited to get into this conversation. Before I get to when I was first introduced to you, when most of us were, actually, I just remembered that I was at the last event that I went to before COVID hit and before the pandemic shut everything down. You actually spoke at Chili's Africa.
Yes, Slave Fest.
Yes. You spoke at that event. That's the last event that I went to, like big event. Yeah, before the world pretty much shut down. So yeah, that's just a nice memory that I thought of now. But also, with you being who you are and with what you've done, I can actually recall my first experience of you. And just to quickly tell you about it, it was my first year working in corporate at a bank, and I was a braid girl a lot, so I braided my hair mostly. I woke up that week and I just decided, no, I'm going to have my natural. I have an afro under my wig. So I just decided to just take my natural hair, to wear my natural hair to work that week. And it just happened to be the same week that your protest was taking place. So it was so interesting for me because I went natural because it wasn't really by choice. My hair was like just not coping with like that stuff doesn't work on my hair. It literally like my hair will fall off. So it was not by choice when I went natural, but obviously I love it now. So when I went to work that week, it was fascinating because now everyone at work was like, "Oh, Pelo, tell us about your experience. What did you go through?" Oh, and I'm like, "Whoa, okay, everybody, hold on." It was just a very odd experience, and now all of a sudden, like everybody was just they were touching my hair, doing this, asking me 20 million questions. And I can't imagine what you went through. But anyway, we'll get to that. I just wanted to share that experience. That was my first exposure to you. And you actually changed my life too, because from that moment on, I more deliberately started wearing my hair out because I was like, clearly they're shocked because they're not used to it. And I was like, why aren't they used to it? So I started doing that more deliberately. And that's just the impact that you had on me in my first year of corporate. So yeah, anyway, back to the podcast. So on this podcast, we like to start all the way from the beginning. So I want you to take us all the way back. Give us a peek into what it was like for you growing up. I know that you're still young, but I mean, you've grown up and you've gone through more experiences than most of us go through. But take us all the way back. All the way back and let us know what it was like for you growing up, what kind of a kid you were, all of that.
I'll take you back to what I can remember. I think it would be difficult for me to take you back to 2002, the year I was born. But I'll take you back to what I can recall. So my upbringing really had a lot to do with the person that I am today. Growing up, I was a very timid, quiet and shy kid. And when I say shy, I was petrified of speaking. I'd never speak. I would only speak with people I'm comfortable with. And the people I'm comfortable with were at home. So whenever I was like in school, in class, anything, I was quiet. I was never heard. I was only seen. And because I was never heard, I was never seen. I was always just that one kid whereby the only time you heard me was you'd hear a very, very, very low voice say, "I'm present." And that was it. You never heard me ever, ever. I remember people even used to question, like, is she here? Was she absent that day? Like, that's just how quiet I was, right?
Wow.
And I'll tell you why I was that quiet. So I grew up. I was never actually taught to be shy or conditioned to be shy or not to speak. I mean, both my parents were very outspoken people, like very, very outspoken. And they would be people whereby they would, if you're not talking, they would ask you, why aren't you talking? Is there something wrong? Right? So when I was growing up, I started reading at the age of 4. And I was encouraged to read. Like when I got curious in terms of reading, when I'd start reading just labels on things in the house, and I'd pick up words, and I was getting stronger in the reading. Like I could read like one sentence or two or three now. My dad, who's like my number one inspiration, like literally the person that I want to become,
Oh my gosh.
literally nurtured my love for reading. Like I grew up in a household where there was a culture of reading. Every day in the morning, the newspaper was bought, and every day, Monday to Sunday. On Sunday, it was the Sunday Times. On Monday morning, it was Pretoria News. Tuesday morning, the Star. Wednesday, and then we'd go back to Pretoria News. And then
wow.
on Friday, we'd actually get Daily Sun.
Shake things up a little bit.
Yeah. So I was encouraged to read. I mean, like when I got stronger in the reading, my dad would actually like hand me the newspaper and say, read the headline article. And I would basically essentially have like a reading, an unprepared reading almost every morning. So when I got to primary school, I think that what really made me shy was the fact that for a very long time, because I was exposed to racial discrimination, prejudice from the time I was born. It was something I was very aware of as a child. I never really was conditioned to believe that we're a free nation, because I understood discrimination because it was what my daily life was like, right? Growing up in an interfaith background and an interracial background, where both my parents essentially both my parents are Black people, but of different cultural ethnic groups, right? There's my mother who's Ndebele, and then there's my father who's Indian and isn't from South Africa and is Muslim, and then there's my mother's side, which is Christian, right? And so I navigated a childhood whereby from my toddlerhood I was exposed to discrimination in its most uncomfortable forms, right? Whether be it people pulling my hair, and whether it would be from the one side where, because I grew up with my father and my mother's family, right? And so I could never say I ever really formed a relationship with my father's side, right? And the few that I did, I had my experiences of discrimination there, whether be it my hair being pulled or my looks being questioned, like my nose not being pointy, my lips, and so I got very, I think it really fueled shyness in me, because I always felt like I wasn't worthy. And so I always said to myself as a child, there's no reason to speak at all, and so I became that kid where I spoke when I'm spoken to, speak when I'm questioned, and only answer when I'm questioned. Otherwise, I would never speak at all. And when I got to primary school, this kind of began. I think this is where my story actually really begins to unfold, because when I got to primary school, so I from the time I was in grade 1, I went to historically white and historically Model C institutions, right? And so I remember my first primary school, a predominantly white school, right, in Pretoria. And I remember walking in, and I remember I had an experience of racism on the very first day, right? First day, I was the one kid that could write their name, and I was able to read, right? And I remember my teacher looking at me and saying to me, usually people like you aren't developed that far at this age. And so the way I had perceived that as a child, because as a child at the time when I was 6, I understood, because it was something I constantly heard. I understood what was the connotation to someone saying you people, right? So so it was a background where I understood discrimination very early. And I think that's where I also began to really also develop this deep desire to want to bring about change. Because I remember growing up, number one, growing up in a political household, because my father played a role in the liberation struggle and was quite a political mind, right? And so I remember at home I was exposed to politics from a very early age, and I think from the time I was able to speak, I literally I took part in those discussions, right, at the dinner table. And so I understood the dynamics of our country at a very early age. And because of that, and along with what I was experiencing directly, I developed this desire that I knew that, something has to change. And I always used to say that this country has to change. There's no ways that this is the destination that has been fought for, and we are at the destination which we speak of, and we're at that destination of freedom. There's no possible way that this is the destination and we're just going to be parked here. There's no possible way that this is just it, because there's still so much that has to change. And so I remember one of the first things that really made me break out of shyness was my dad signed me up under the Pretoria English Society. And basically it was where all the schools in Pretoria would take part in a speech festival where you could do a reading or you could recite poetry in front of a board of adjudicators, as well as all the competing schools, right? And this was not to my knowledge at all. I only found out the day before. And I was told you're going to recite a poem on Thursday. And I think the first time I recited a poem in front of a room of about 45 people, as a very, very shy kid with a very high-pitched voice, I think that's when I started to sort of want to break out of my shell of shyness, because when I saw the reaction in people's faces, it made me feel like I was something, right? And it made me feel like something valuable could come out of me. And I think that feeling of something valuable could come out of me also became the driving force of me wanting to be a change maker. And so throughout primary, I had a really tough time as well, because I was one of the kids that always got bullied because I was tiny, had a high-pitched voice. So I was a really easy target for being made fun of. And also I was quite the nerd. So I was always the person reading. There was always a book in front of my face. So I was quite an easy target. And I got to a point where it just got to me, the bullying got to me. So I did also have a phase of straightened hair. Thinking about grade 4, 5, and early grade 6, I had straightened hair. Then, I don't know, I just got to a turning point when I was in grade 6. And that's also when you're about to enter adolescent years. And so you do experience like emotional changes,
Yeah, the shift in you.
Yeah. So I think when I like mid grade 6, I just wasn't satisfied with looking at myself and looking at an altered version of myself. And I remember saying that how I look right now isn't necessarily me, it's altered. And I don't want that anymore. I want to look the way I'm supposed to look, and look the way I was born to look. So I went natural again. I cut my hair again. And I think that's when that shell of shyness completely broke off. And I went from being one of the most unnoticed people and one of the most made fun of people to being the center of attention and the main speaker. And so I think that change also, it also made me speak up for myself more, because never really spoke up every time I dealt with outbursts of racism. I never really spoke up. And I think me just simply going natural, it sort of made me feel like there was more to this. And it made me feel like this was just beyond hair. This was a reaffirmation of my identity and who I am. And so if I'm existing in my true state, why should I exist silently? And so then I began also to speak up for myself. And I remember I used to actually contest educators every time they would make racist remarks, and I would speak up until I actually became branded and known as someone that was outspoken. And that was a very massive change, which marked the end of primary school. And I exited primary school a very confident person, as well as a very, very outspoken person and unapologetic in my identity after like 6 years of shyness.
Yeah.
So when I got to high school, I think everything in me, like, I knew that there was no ways I was going to exist silently. Whether be it, I knew that, number one, all my childhood teachings, from just even the background in reading and the political background, I knew that I was going to take all of that into me to form an identity, and I knew that I was not going to exist silently. So when I got to high school, an all-girls school, not necessarily predominantly white, however, the leadership being predominantly white and the staff body being predominantly white, and it still upholding traditions of a past which was exclusionary in the institution. So I found myself confronting racism directly in its harshest form. I remember saying I was literally in the furnace, the hot pit of white supremacy, and I was like, and I'm literally burning, and everyone around me can see it, and people are aware of this, and there's not a single person who's oblivious to it. And it cannot be that this is normalized, and it cannot be that this is our reality, and this is our reality as a country that is branded as free, and as a youth that are forcefully fed this identity of freedom, and we find ourselves forcefully having to embrace it. This cannot be our reality. And I remember, among many outbursts and many traumatic experiences, I think the biggest one that completely changed and switched things up, where I literally said that there's no ways I'm going to keep quiet, and I'm determined to bring about change, because the country has to change, and it will change. So I remember in May 2016, I was called in by an educator, one of the she was one of the heads of a department, right? And she called me into her office on my own. First question she asked me, she said to me, "There's usually an Indian man that comes to pick you up. Is that your biological father?" And I answered her, and I was like, "Why would that not be my biological father? Why are you asking me that? Why are you concerned about that?" And she said, "No, I'm just asking because it doesn't seem like it." And I asked her, "Why doesn't it seem like it?" And she went on to tell me, "Well, compared to him, your hair grows out exotically compared to his." And I asked her, I was like, "What do you mean by exotic? Can you unpack that for me? Because I want to understand what you mean." And she went on to ask me to take a seat in her office. And so I took a seat, and she told me that my afro has grown past its limit, and it looks oddly exotic, and it's not the girl's highway, nor is it ladylike, right? And she went on to tell me that I have to do something about it, because I don't have a choice, because if I ought to fit in, I cannot look as exotic as I look. And so I told her that exotic is a term that I reserve for animals and not human beings. And she told me that in her world, exotic is reserved for the other, which is not the normal way, as the norm, which is not the norm. Exotic is reserved for what is not the norm. And she told me that she's questioning a lot around my identity. And she went on to open her cupboard and take out a pencil, and she stuck it in my hair, and it didn't move at all. And she went on to tell me, I think you're going to have to censor this because this is a very, very derogatory term. She went on to tell me that I have rechter kafferare. And I remember walking out of that office feeling like someone had just exercised superiority over my identity and my entire being and existence. And I remember being so shattered that I was like, there's no ways I've just experienced something like this, something that my parents' generation went under.
The pencil test.
I was completely, I was gobsmacked. I was like, how in 2016, 22 years into democracy, how, and I remember being so shattered and I cried my eyes out, and I literally, the following day, I was like, there's no ways, things are going to change. Things are definitely going to change. And I remember then speaking to schoolmates of mine, which were all, this is a very important part that I need to mention because it ties in a lot with my story, right? So they were all older than me. These were all the grade 11s and the matrics, right? And what happened was they grew fond of me because I was outspoken and because I understood the issues and the system itself, right? And so they grew fond of me. And so I went on to tell them about what happened to me, right? And everyone was devastated. And in a sense whereby we weren't devastated because everyone pitied that had to happen to me, but we were devastated at the fact that this cannot be that this has been the reality of everyone who's come before us, and it's going to be the reality of everyone that is going to come after us. And if not now, then when are things going to change? We can't continue to say that things are going to change whilst there's a slow progress and things are not changing, right? And so we went on to say that things are going to change. And at the time, we didn't have an answer as to how things are going to change, but we were yet to find it. So over the next 2 months, things intensified where we were not getting threats, and we were being told that you won't write exams if you do not do something about your hair, or we were even further told that afros and dreadlocks are prohibited on the property of Girls High.
So it got worse.
It got more intense, and where you would even face disciplinary action for speaking in an African language, right? And you would face disciplinary action for talking about racism, whereby you had to be silent and you had to silence yourself, essentially. So I remember August came and this was also the peak of Fees Fall at the time. And so for me, on a personal level, I witnessed young people bringing about a necessary change in the country. And that sparked something in me that made me feel as though I, as a young person, have a role in this generation and in this time right now to do something, because freedom isn't a destination. It's a continuous path, right? And so it's an ongoing thing, and it's not necessarily a destination. And even if it were a destination, we haven't arrived yet. And so I remember seeing the female leaders of Fees Fall, and I remember being so deeply inspired that on a personal level, I was like, there's no ways I'm going to be silent in an institution which is at war with my identity and at war with Blackness. And this isn't necessarily for myself, but it's for everyone that would come after me. So I remember going up to one specific matric that grew very, very fond of me. And I said to her, look, we have to do something, and now urgently, because we're at war. A war is being waged on our Blackness, and we can't afford to sit and keep quiet. So I remember that's when the planning began. And we said, the only way to do this is through a protest, right? And so we said, we're protesting because we're unable to breathe under the conditions which we are subjected to. And so we planned a protest for the 26th of August to dress in all black, which would symbolize our resistance, because for us all black symbolized resistance for us. And so we planned to dress in all black, and we would start a silent demonstration on a Friday where we had a civics day, because prior to that Saturday, there was going to be an event at the school, right? Spring Fair, which is an event which is popularly known in Pretoria, which is hosted by the school. Okay, well, before COVID, it was always hosted, and it celebrates the entrance of spring, and basically the entire Pretoria is invited. And so the 26th of August came, and there was something in me that just wouldn't burn down. And I just can't explain it and put my words on it, but it was as if there was a fire that was not being put out, and it was just burning, and it was hot. Hey? And so I remember walking in, and all of us as Black girls were dressed in all black, and we had head wraps on, and we even accessorized with traditional accessories. And I remember us saying the notion of the day is that we're even going to defy simple rules such as, oh, you can't have your afro out, you can't have your dreadlocks out, and you can't speak in any language other than English and Afrikaans, or you as Black girls can't convene in groups of more than 3. And so, because that was a rule as well, because we would be accused of conspiracy when we were in groups of more than 3. So I remember we said we'd be in large groups, and we would speak in our African languages, and we would be ourselves, and we would be who we're supposed to be, right? And so honestly, that moment was a beginning. It was the foundation of something that was much more significant than me, just as Zulaikha Patel, and just as us at the time, the Girls High Girls. It was the beginning of something much more significant and much more greater than just us as girls at the time. And so I remember the response that we got led to the following protest, right, on the following day. So on the day, what happened was, in the morning on the assembly, we had one of our headmistresses stand on the balcony and count us one by one, all the people that were demonstrating on the day. And she was looking down and counting us. And it, in a sense, felt like we were being counted in such an inferior way. And it felt like we were being criminalized as well.
Yeah.
We were being, as girls that are minors, were being rendered to criminality because of the way we were being counted. And we didn't know what that counting meant. And what that counting meant was that we would be called in for individual meetings one by one to intimidate us, one by one. And that also meant that they hired more security guards on the day, because we as Black girls had because there was so few Black employees, we had relationships with them, because these are the people that would protect us, who we viewed in the locus parental view, because at the time we were like, there's no possible way we can view those that harm us in a parental light. So we viewed the black staff members as our parents, right? And so we knew exactly who our security is. And so anytime there was someone new, we knew exactly that person was new. And so we saw how many new male security guards there were, and how they tailed us, and how, because I remember the group that I sat in, we were tailed up until the end of the school day, because that group, basically, essentially, the people that were the most outspoken, myself and among many other girls, were in that group. And so we were tailed the whole entire afternoon. And so we said to ourselves that there's no possible way that this is the response. Such indirect violence is being perpetuated. Yeah. So we said that the following day we have to march. We have to. This, it can't end here. It can't. So the following day we planned, we'd march at 12 o'clock. We'd be silent. I would be silent. And our defiance on the day was wearing badges that were yellow that said, "Hi, don't be racist," right? And some people even wore badges of how to pronounce their name, like the phonetic pronunciation of their name, I remember having one saying, it's not, and so I basically spelled out how my name would be pronounced and butchered. It's not Zulaikha or Zulaikha, it's Zulaikha. And I had it in the phonetic, in the, breaking it up into little syllables, right? And so I remember us on the day, it was even a very hostile day. Like we're being guarded, we're being watched, like we're placed under surveillance, right? And it was all the people that were outspoken, and I was one of them. And at the time, we didn't even know that we were doing something that would later become something so deeply significant to Blackness in the post-apartheid democratic era in the education arena, right? So I remember 12 o'clock came and we met up at the meeting point. And at the meeting point, there was a security guard who was armed with a gun and with a dog. And essentially they'd known that we were doing something and we were up to something. And so the meeting point, there was a gate, and deliberately so that gate got locked, right? And so what we did was we were very smart in speaking to members of the public who were there at the event, and we would tell them what the situation is, and we deliberately chose young people. And so a lot of people already, we had them on our side. And so when that gate was locked, it became very, very fishy and strange to members of the public as to why is a gate being locked in a public event? Open up the gate. And so there was pressure from the public for them to open up the gate. And so they opened up the gate. And I remember one of the security guards saying to us that we're breaking a city council code. And for the first time in my life, I spoke without any fear, or there wasn't shaking. My voice wasn't shaking for the first time in my life. And I asked him, and I was like, "Can you quote that law for me from this? Can you quote it for me? Because according to us, we know the Constitution. We're not just protesting without knowing the Constitution. We know that constitutionally, as citizens that are unhappy, we have the right to protest, right?" And so that was the first time, and for me, that was on a personal level a very big turning point, because that was the first time in my life I spoke without stumbling on my words because of how terrified I'd be to speak. And that was the first time there was no shaking in my voice. And he couldn't answer me. And so we proceeded with the march. And when we got to our standing point, we were confronted by a high risk security team. And these were the heads of the high risk security team. And so for an event that is in a school, a high-risk security team consisting of security that is all male, right? Is all male, white run, is armed with guns, is armed with dogs as well. That was the first time in my life I think I saw a gun that big in my entire life. I'd never witnessed a gun that big. And so I remember even saying to myself that this isn't what it should be. So when they confronted us, they asked us what we're doing, right? And we said that we're unhappy with the conditions which we're subjected to, and we're demanding a change. We're demanding a change on a policy level, as well as a change on a systemic level within the traditions that uphold the institution. We're demanding a change, and we're demanding for those to be more representative of Africanness and Blackness and more inclusive of that. And we stated what we're demanding. We're demanding an end to the racist hair policy. We're demanding an end to a policy that states that we can't speak in our mother tongues because we're in Africa. There's nowhere else we can be. There's nowhere else in our very origin that you can prohibit us from being African. You can't do that. Where else are we supposed to be African? And so I remember one of the security guards holding me by my collar and saying that what we're doing is unlawful and we must disperse and stop immediately. And now's not the time to address such issues. And I remember asking, then when is the right time for change? When is the right time? Because it's been 22 years. And you're saying to me that in more than 2 decades, there was never a right time. Then if not now, then when? When is the right time going to be 3 generations later after my generation, and children are still dealing with the very same issues that I've confronted throughout my entire schooling career? Is that the right time then, when you've abused even more Black children that are yet to follow. Is that then the right time? And he didn't answer. And all he said was, we're going to count to 3. And by 3, you must disperse and immediately stop what you're doing. And he counted, and he said, he started with 1, waited, 2, waited. And he was like, we're demanding you to disperse, because if you do not disperse, action is going to be taken against you. And we said, what is the action? And they then said to us, we're going to arrest you if you do not disperse. To me, and I laughed, because at the time I was just like, what? I'm 13 and I'm being threatened with arrest. What? Right? And he counted to 3. Then he said, this is the last chance for you to all disperse. And we stood there silently. And for us, that meant that we're defending our Blackness, and there was no way we were going to move. And so then he proceeded to say, then we're going to arrest all of you. You're all going to get arrested. And at the time, for me, because there was this fire in me that I just can't even find the right words to really describe, unplanned, unknowingly, like, I don't think I even planned that I was going to say this, but then I went on to I was like, no, then let it be us then. Because there's no ways that this is business as usual. So in my mind, when I said that to myself, I just put my fists up in an X. And for me, that was defying them silently. And I went on to say, then you can arrest all of us, take us all of us, arrest us. And I didn't know that me saying that would later lead to everyone resisting and silently calmly defying that, and everyone saying, then arrest all of us, take all of us. And so that's when that moment right there, that was what was captured. And
that iconic picture.
It went on for about 10 minutes, going back and forth, and us not willing to back down. And for us, we said, we're not backing down for another 22 years to come, and children are going to experience this. There's no ways. This is for the girls that are going to walk these corridors after us, rightfully so, as they should. And so I remember after that, we were forced to disperse, and then we were taken into the main building, and we were in a room. We're in a room with the 2 security guards that were heading up the high risk team, and they basically intimidated us and said that we're going to face disciplinary action on Monday, and on Monday we ought to be prepared for that. And after us refusing, our refusal to be held, essentially being held hostage with them, because that was we were in that room against our will, and we were in that room without adult representation on our side. And we then said that, okay, and when we left, and we all parted our ways, and now it's a Sunday, we sat for some time, and I think someone texted me and said, what are we going to do? This can't be the ending, right? And we were like, this also can't be where it ends. We can't be violated, and then we speak up for ourselves, and then we're further violated more, And so I remember saying then, listen, we live in the 21st century. There's one tool that we have that will never fail us, will never forsake us, and that's social media. And social media has formed a very big part of my activism. Being a Gen Z activist, it's formed a very big part because it's a connecting tool to connect with the whole world, right? From where I am right now. And so I remember we then started the hashtag Stop Racism at Pretoria High School for Girls. And we started this hashtag at 6 p.m. And the first thing we did was we put up footage of the arrest threats. And then we started a conversation amongst ourselves of tweeting about our experiences. And in about 2 hours, it became a Pretoria conversation where old girls from the school, as well as former alumni pupils from other schools and other pupils of other schools, was all sharing a conversation around our experiences, right? And in about 4 hours, it became a Gauteng conversation. Then at about 10:30, it became a national conversation. And we're driving a conversation which was something that was never addressed 22 years after negotiations and after democracy had been declared. It had never been addressed. And we started something that was never brought to the surface, right? And I remember the following morning, it became a global conversation around institutionalized racism in education. And then we had a petition. We started a petition that gained over 29,000 signatures, which then led to the suspension of the code of conduct, as well as led to an investigation, which led to a change in the policy itself. And further, it also sparked something much more significant than us, which sparked the activism of other high school pupils, whereby there were other protests in other schools that followed, in Sansosi, Lawson Brown, Pro Arte, in many other schools, Crawford, Lonehill. There was a demonstration as well, and it sparked something bigger than us, which was young Black people understanding that we belong in the spaces that we're in, and in these spaces of education, it cannot be that we do not see ourselves reflected and our Blackness is not included, and we defend our Blackness and fight for its inclusion in these spaces. And that was something bigger than us, and it was the beginning of something much greater than us, and something where there'd be no turning point, and it would just be a continuous ongoing movement of young Black resistance. And and I think that it starts with something very big, and for me that also became the foundation of my activism, because from that point on I understood the power that young people had, and I understood that immediately, even before we drafted the petition. I understood that the very same day when I saw that young people collectively started a global conversation which brought the world to a standstill to speak about something that was deemed as uncomfortable and something that was never spoken about. And I remember everything that followed being the foundation of my activism, because I then understood that I think that this is what I was placed in my generation for. And I then also saw that change is possible, and change is possible not just on an institutional level, but on a global level. And I then began, I think that's when I knew that there was no turning point in my advocacy and my activism. And I then became a change maker, and I was determined. And I said to myself that if there's anything I'm going to do is bring change in the world, and I'm committed to doing so. I'm committed to not just forming part of discussing change and the idea of change, but I'm going to form part of propelling the country and the world in the direction of change. And that was just the beginning for me, and was the foundation of everything that was yet to come. And for me, change meant even internal change on an interpersonal and internal level, because it's not enough that laws and policies change. Institutions are upheld by traditions and culture. So it's not enough that laws just change. People have to change, and people are going to change through education. And the only way to do that is when you change and decolonize education. And for me, that's when I became a firm advocate of decolonization as well. And it was the beginning of me entering entering social justice activism. And from that point on, I've made a commitment to myself that it's not just a fight for everyone else and my community, but it's for me as well. And it's for my existence as well, right here as a Black girl in this world, right here, right now. It's for me as well. I'm not just fighting for everyone around me. I'm fighting for myself as a Black girl as well to exist.
Wow. There's so much. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Also, specifically for sharing the events that led to that, as well as what actually happened. Because, and I was just watching some of your other interviews, and you mentioned before that it wasn't just a hair thing, and everybody made it made that event a hair thing. So I'm so happy that you just, you painted that context for us to say that it's bigger than just hair. It's institutionalized, like you were saying. And also, I really appreciate you sharing that you were a shyer child and now you are who you are, and now you've gotten out of that shell. I wanted to ask you if there is like a young person listening to this today and they are shy, they don't speak up, they haven't found their voice yet. Since you've been on that journey, what advice would you give them?
The advice I'd give them is that you need to understand that your existence is deliberate. And when you understand that your existence is deliberate, anything is possible and you're able to walk in the magic that you should be walking in. And you need to understand that your existence and placement in the world and this generation is deliberate. And you need to exist deliberately in all of your magic.
I love that. That's absolutely beautiful. It's not by mistake that you're here in this moment right now. It's deliberate. Yes, that's beautiful. Another thing I wanted to just touch on was, I mean, it can't be easy, right? What has been the hardest thing about being an activist? Not necessarily just your that specific experience in 2016, but just what you go through. What has been the hardest part of just advocating for what you believe in and, being an activist?
I see. Yes. So, I think the hardest, one of the, because it's never been rosy, right? It's never been rosy. Equally, it's never been something I was going to give up on, even though it wasn't rosy. I think one of the hardest things that I've navigated is being a Black girl, right? Number one. Just being Black and being a woman is, a lot of people find it surprising, but it's very difficult, because when you're with your male activist counterparts, they're deemed as though their activism is more deliberate than yours, and they're seen as leaders easily, and they're seen as though they matter more, and their voices are heard more, and you could be in a space with them only and you would say something, but the minute a man says something that's exactly the same as what you said, he's praised. And women activists are always painted as stubborn, hot-headed, hard-headed individuals, yet men that possess the very same characteristics of being unspoken and being discerning and having that determination to not want to give up are painted as messiahs, as heroic, and there are less demeaning characteristics attached to them. But when you're a woman, you're hard-headed, you're stubborn, and you're hot-headed, and so I think that's been one of the challenges. But also I think that just beyond that, being this young has also been a bit of a challenge for me, given that with South Africa, for example, a lot of the other youth activists are people that are like about 10 years, 6 years older than me, because they form part of the Seasons Fall generation. And so it's quite difficult being this young, because at times your presence is questioned, your voice is questioned, as though does it even matter what you have to say? And you're constantly in a position of being patronized, being questioned, or people around you wanting to parent you, right? As though these aren't the people that you should be working hand in hand with to bring change about, And then I think for me, just the personal challenge has been that being so young and entering the space so young, I've faced sort of a bit of isolation, where it's been quite a lonely path, because it's like I'm so young, right? And this isn't something that many of my peers around me are engaged in, and it does, in a sense, isolate you when you become very outspoken and you're painted as the outspoken one, and you are the voice, essentially, and you're deemed as the voice. Because I always say to people that there's no person in this world that is voiceless. People are systemically made to feel and believe that they're voiceless and they're silenced, but no one is voiceless. And so when you're painted like that, there's a very high expectation, but there's also a lot of isolation from everyone else.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I'm glad you're mentioning these, because a lot of us are now doing a lot of passion work, a lot of mission driven work. And I think it's important to just highlight that it's not easy, and that people, and young people especially, really do understand what you're going into. Not to try and discourage anyone. It's just the reality of the world. And these are the things that hopefully will change over time, as more and more people get involved in mission-driven work and activism, actually, specifically. You also mentioned once in an interview that you did, you spoke about, are you like what? Your eyes went big. No, you mentioned radical self-love being important. This is in relation to your book that we'll talk about, but just in relation to that, I just want to know, what does radical self-love look like for you specifically?
For me, radical self-love is existing unapologetically, without allowing for the opinions of how I should exist as a Black girl to define how I'm going to exist and shape how I show up. And it's also understanding the power that lies in my being, and understanding that I am more than enough, and I'm worthy. I'm not just enough, I'm more than enough. And for me, it's a very deep reflection as well, and also existing as who I am and loving what I'm taught and conditioned not to love, like my hair. And since we're here now, can you tell us a little bit about your book? By the way, one thing that I love, and like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed about specifically with your book, is the fact that you chose pretty much an all-Black team. You can correct me if I'm wrong, right? Oh, that is brilliant. I love that. I'm also just like, everything Black, yes. So can you tell us? Yes, that was very deliberate. And that's something that I do in all the majority of the work that I do, because I believe that I don't come as one, but I come as who I am. And who I am is not just one, but who I am is, as an African, I don't just come on my own. I come with my community, and everything and anything I do for the people must be done with the people. And so in everything that I do, and I'm still going to do, best believe it is going to be Black produced, Black, like it's just going to be, this is ours, And so for me, it was very important that because I'm writing a book dedicated to little Black girls, that they see when they open up a book and they see the names there, that they see names of Black women, and they know that we can come together and do something for ourselves and something that is ours, because if the book is not just for me, the book is dedicated to us. And so it had to be that it was us that would contribute to it, right? In the publishing of it. And so that was a very deliberate decision. And even going forward in everything and anything that I am going to do, and what I wear Black owned. I buy Black owned products from Black owned creators. And so it's very deliberate, because I believe in building our own community, because if not us, then who? And so we need to bring forth our own and begin to create and produce and make our own for our own community. And so my one mission with the book was to tell an African story about us, for us, and by us, for the world as well. And so that's why I had to go with being deliberate in getting a Black publisher and a team of Black women that would form part of even the designing and the layout of my book. And so that I can proudly say that the book was done by us as a community of Black women, for us.
Yes, I love that. And I have like 2 nieces right now. They're both 2 years old, and I cannot wait to just get them the book and have them grow up in a world where, because they both have natural hair, and have them grow up in a world where they're literally going to page through a book where the people in the book look like them. That's for me absolutely incredible.
Yes. And so the book was it was a very deliberate action, and it was influenced by, number one, my childhood, growing up with a firm love for reading. And so I said that children need to be taught to love books, and that's what I want to do. I want to give a Black girl child pass down the same love I had and still have for reading and books and literature onto her, so that she sees possibilities, and also sees possibilities that are going to propel her into telling her own narrative and shaping her own narrative. And so and taking ownership of her own narrative. And equally, to do that and to teach that love, they ought to see themselves, right? And so for children to see themselves, it affirms their being and existence. And so growing up and loving reading and not being able to see books with people that look like me, and not just people that look like me, but stories that are my reality as an African child, made me want to go and write a book that is relatable, that is a representation of our beautiful reality, because our reality isn't just pain and suffering. We have so much beauty, and that should be shown and expressed, And I also wanted the message that was at the heart of the movement in 2016 to be documented as a permanent reference for centuries to come, for a Black girl child to pick up a book and understand that we did something, and what we did was never for just us.
That is absolutely beautiful. I'm very happy that you actually did this. And like you're saying, documenting things, because it just can't be a moment in time. It should be documented and live on. So I'm so happy. I'm so excited. I'm excited as if I'm that little girl now growing, like reading it myself, like specifically at a very, very, very young age, So I'm very excited for this kind of work to be out there by a young Black person such as yourself. It's absolutely brilliant. So obviously you're studying now and you are writing more books, and so tell us. Yes, I read that you have like 2 books that you're writing.
Yes, I'm beginning with those, and they're gonna be out soon. Next year, maybe another one in the following year.
Oh man, all the best to that. But I want to specifically ask you, so what is your vision for your life? What is your vision for Zulaikha? Every time your eyes open, I'm like, I wonder what's going on in your mind. But with you studying now, with you writing books, and obviously with you having this passion for activism, and just you existing in J as well as a young Black girl who has, you obviously so multifaceted. It's not just your activism work that exists in you. You know, there's relationships, there's all these kinds of things. And by that, I mean like friendships, family, all these things. So what is your vision for future Zulaikha?
My vision for myself is that, okay, I think we should put a time frame on it because it's very hard to just say vision without a time frame.
Yes.
I think maybe in the next 10 years, my vision for myself is that I've published more books with one mission and mandate to take ownership of my narrative and to tell African stories and to tell our reality, to tell stories that affirm the power that exists in Blackness, and to write about Africa for the world, not have the world define who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I see myself having published more books, and those would all be dedicated to us as a people. In terms of growing my activism, I hope that in the next 10 years, I've achieved bringing about enough change to ensure that children in the next 10 years are not having the same conversations that I had, and that the implications we face now, we no longer face then. And I hope that the conditions of the country don't look exactly the same, or if not worse than what they are now. And also I hope by then to be an admitted advocate of the High Court.
Hey, yes, put it up.
That has always been my childhood dream. As a child, when I stuck to one thing, when they asked me when I was 6, what do you want to be? Yeah. I said I want to be a lawyer, and not because of the profession, but because of what is entailed to it, to defend humanity and to be an advocate of social justice, you know, and so to defend humanity and to fight for social justice for humanity. And I do hope to also, on a more personal level, I think that I want to still be the unapologetic person I am, and carry that with me so that others around me are inspired to live in the same way, and those younger than me are inspired to live in an unapologetic, fierce light. And I hope that the light is even brighter than what it is now. And so publishing, entering the legal fraternity, more change making, growing myself personally, aiming to be happy. And I think that far too many times we never talk. When we talk about Black girls, Black women, we're so influenced to fight for a life that, and I'm not saying that this is wrong. Yes, fight for that life, you know, fight for the life to ensure that your circumstances change. But equally, I think that we hardly, whenever we speak to Black girls about what they envision for their future, yes, it's always going to be about the career, right? And it's always about the growing the career, and it's always about everything externally that involves the world and giving themselves to the world. But I think that as well, what should be included is giving back to yourself. As much as you should give, you should receive. And I think for me as a feminist, that's very important, that you need to give and receive, give to the world and receive back for yourself and pour into yourself. And so I aim to be happy as well and at peace.
You can't pour from an empty cup. That's what they always. And lastly, this is my favorite question that I love to ask on the podcast. It comes from the quote that I love that says, "Be who you needed when you were younger." That's my favorite quote, and it's what I try to do. So now that we've spoken about future Zulaikha, tell me, if you could go back in time and pick any age, it could be you when you were, still in primary school, still the shy young girl. It could be you when you were starting to get involved in the movement and activism. At any age, if you could go back, it could be you yesterday. You were younger yesterday. If you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you say to her?
think that my younger self is definitely number one, proud of the person I've prospered and blossomed into. And what I would go back and say to my younger self is that there is always something to say, and it's valid. It's valid. And I think what I would also say is that your being here and your existence is worthy. And I would tell my younger self not to be afraid of my capabilities. And so that's what I would tell my younger self, because I think my younger self was very afraid.
That's beautiful. I don't want to add anything on. I think that's a beautiful ending to this wonderful interview. And I know I said lastly, how can people follow your journey, get in touch with you, buy your book, of course? Let us know your contact details.
Okay, so I have Instagram at Zulaikha Patel _ZULAIKHA. And also, how you can purchase the book is it's available at CNA nationwide, exclusive books nationwide, as well as F&E Kids.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing.